I tear apart cancer. I filter your blood. This little 4-year-old pastor says this to a millionaire. But 2 days later, after taking a test, he is surprised by the result. Comment on what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The sun hadn't yet risen over Sedona, Arizona, when Theodore Ted Vasconcelos, 56, sat on the porch of his sprawling ranch house. His tired eyes scanned the red rock landscape, while his hands trembled, holding the envelope he had just received. From the lab. The businessman, owner of the largest dairy empire in the Southwest, couldn't believe what he was reading. The words of the diagnosis seemed to dance before his eyes, forming a sentence he never imagined receiving. The phone rang for the 10th time that morning. It was Donna, his younger sister, responsible for managing the business during his absences. Ted watched the phone vibrate on the solid wood table until it went silent. He didn't have the strength to talk to anyone, much less explain why he had cancelled all the meetings for the week. A cool breeze blew, carrying the scent of desert sage. Ted closed his eyes, remembering his father, who had built that empire from scratch. "How would you handle this, Dad?" he murmured to himself, carefully folding the test results and putting them in the inside pocket of his custom-made Italian blazer. That same morning, on the other side of town, in a simple house with peeling paint, Irene woke up before sunrise, as she did every day. At 32, her face bore the marks of a hard life, but her brown eyes held an unwavering determination. She made a simple coffee and went to the small room where her daughter, Jenny, 6, was still sleeping. "Honey, wake up," she called softly, adjusting the girl's curly hair. "It's time to take Mr. Johnson's sheep out to pasture." Jenny opened her eyes slowly, revealing a deep and mysteriously mature gaze for her age. "Mom, I had that dream again," the girl said, sitting up in bed. The sad man needed help. Irene sighed, used to her daughter's peculiar dreams. Since she was little, Jenny had a different sensitivity, a unique way of seeing the world that sometimes frightened her mother. "It was just a dream, honey. Come on, get dressed. I have a lot of work at the Mendelssohns today." While preparing a simple breakfast, bread with butter and warm milk, Irene looked out the kitchen window at the small backyard. The clothes on, the line swayed in the morning breeze, reminding her of the dozens of items she would need to wash that day. That was how she had supported the house since Alan, her husband, had mysteriously disappeared 3 years ago. Ted decided to do something he hadn't done in years, walk around the property he had inherited from his father. He put on simple clothes, ignoring the insistent calls that kept coming to his cell phone. His steps led him beyond the limits of the impeccable garden into the fields that bordered his ranch. That's when he heard a soft sound of bells, the small jingle bells of the sheep. As he rounded a bend in the dirt road, he came across a scene that looked like it came out of a painting. A little girl sitting on a rock, surrounded by a small flock of sheep. She was humming softly, a melody that resembled old nursery rhymes. Jenny looked up when she felt Ted's presence. For a moment, the businessman felt as if something inexplicable was passing through him. The child's gaze seemed to see beyond his impeccable appearance, beyond his worries, straight into his soul. "You're sick," she said simply, her childish voice carrying an unsettling certainty. Ted felt his heart skip a beat. How do you know that?" The girl tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. "I can see it. It's here," she pointed to her own chest, in the same place where the tumor was developing in Ted's body. "I tear apart cancer. I filter your blood." The businessman took a step back, stunned. Those words, spoken so naturally by a child who couldn't possibly know about his condition, made his world spin. Before he could say anything, he felt a strange sensation running through his body, an inexplicable warmth, as if something inside him was transforming. "Jenny!" A woman's voice cut through the morning air. Irene appeared hurriedly, carrying a bundle of clothes. Her eyes widened when she saw her daughter talking to a stranger, especially someone dressed in clothes that clearly indicated his social position. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, pulling Jenny by the hand. "My daughter shouldn't be bothering you." "No, wait," Ted tried to say, but Irene was already quickly walking away with the girl. He stood there, still, watching the two disappear down the dirt road, while the child's words echoed in his mind. That night, for the first time in weeks, Ted was able to sleep without pain. When he woke up the next morning, a fixed idea dominated his thoughts. He needed to find that girl again. There was something in her, something that went beyond reason, beyond everything that his world of numbers and business could explain. What he didn't know was that that seemingly casual encounter would mark the beginning of a journey that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. In the simplicity of a little shepherdess, a mystery was hidden that would challenge everything he thought he knew about life, death, and the power of hope. Dr. Olson's office was quiet when Ted entered for his follow-up appointment. The doctor, his childhood friend, stared in astonishment at the new tests, comparing them with the previous ones. At 38, Olson had seen many intriguing cases in his career, but nothing like this. "Ted, this is unexplainable," he said, adjusting his thick-rimmed glasses. "The cancer cells show a significant reduction. In just 2 days, your condition has completely changed. Did you start some alternative treatment that you didn't tell me about?" The businessman shifted uneasily in the leather chair. How to explain something that he himself did not understand? How to mention the encounter with a child shepherdess without seeming like he had lost his mind? "No, Olson, no new treatment." But the girl's words did not leave his head. "I tear apart cancer. I filter your blood." Ted felt divided between the rationality that had always guided his life and something greater, something that defied all logic. Meanwhile, in the humblest area of Sedona, Irene scrubbed clothes in the tub in the back of the Mendelssohn's house, her hands rough and cracked from the soap. The midday sun beat down on her back, but she couldn't stop. She still had 5 houses to attend to that day. "Mrs. Mendelssohn," she called when the employer passed through the yard, "do you know a rich, older man who lives near the Red Rocks?" Mrs. Mendelssohn, a 70-year-old woman who knew everyone in town, stopped watering her orchids. "That must be Ted Vasconcelos, owner of Serrano Dairies." "Why, Irene?" The laundress's heart squeezed. So it was him. The man everyone was saying was sick. "Nothing, Mrs. Mendelssohn. It's just that he was talking to my Jenny the other day near Mr. Johnson's pasture." Mrs. Mendelssohn frowned. "Ted Vasconcelos talking to your girl? That's strange. He hardly leaves that ranch house since he got sick. His sister, Donna, who takes care of everything now." Irene felt a shiver run down her spine. Since Alan disappeared, she had developed a sixth sense to protect Jenny. Something in that story was not right. In the Vasconceloses' ranch house, Donna walked back and forth in her office, her high heels marking the Italian marble floor. At 54, she maintained an austere elegance, her grey hair always impeccably styled. "How can you cancel chemotherapy, Ted? Have you lost your mind?" "Donna, you don't understand," he replied, sitting in one of the leather armchairs. "I'm feeling better. The tests show a significant improvement." Improvement. Donna stopped, staring at her brother. "That's impossible. The doctor said you had 6 months at most. What kind of false hope are you feeding?" That same afternoon, Jenny was herding sheep when she felt a strong dizziness. She leaned against a tree, her little hands trembling. Since the encounter with that man, something had changed inside her. It was as if a part of her energy had been drained. "You're not well, little one." A gentle voice surprised her. It was Connie, the old midwife of the town, a 60-year-old woman whom everyone respected and feared in equal measure. Her wise eyes studied the girl intently. "Just a little tired, Mrs. Connie," Jenny replied, trying to smile. The old midwife sat down next to her, her wrinkled hands caressing the girl's hair. "You have a special gift, don't you? Just like your father did." Jenny widened her eyes. "Did you know my father?" Before Connie could answer, they heard footsteps approaching. It was Ted, who had finally found his way to the pasture where the girl was tending the sheep. "I need to talk to your mother," he said, addressing Jenny gently. "Where can I find her?" Connie stood up, placing herself between the businessman and the girl. "Ted Vasconcelos interested in a poor child. What are you really looking for?" "It's not what you're thinking," he defended himself. "Something happened, something I can't explain." At that moment, Irene appeared running, alerted by a neighbor who had seen Ted's luxurious car parked near the pasture. "What's going on? Here, why are you harassing my daughter?" The tension in the air was palpable. Ted, the powerful businessman, found himself surrounded by 3 generations of women who looked at him with suspicion. But before he could explain himself, Jenny fainted. "My daughter!" Irene cried, running to help the girl. "This isn't normal," Connie murmured, her aged face marked with worry. "The gift is taking its toll too early." "What gift? What are you talking about?" asked Irene, desperate, with Jenny unconscious in her arms. Ted, feeling an inexplicable guilt, stepped forward. "Let me help. I can take her to the hospital." "No!" exclaimed Connie and Irene at the same time. "No hospital," Connie said firmly. "She needs another type of care. Irene, take her to my house. I have something that can help, something I kept from Alan's time." The name of the missing husband made Irene shudder. What does my husband have to do with this? But Connie was already walking away, her determined steps marking the dirt road. "Come with me and bring the girl. As for you, Ted Vasconcelos, I suggest you keep your distance, at least for now." Ted stood there still, watching the women walk away with Jenny. His body, which had been feeling so good in recent days, began to hurt again. It was as if an invisible connection had been cut. What no one noticed was the elegant figure watching everything from afar, inside a dark car with tinted windows. Donna squeezed the steering wheel so hard that her knuckles were white. Her phone rang. It was her contact at the hospital. "Yes," she said in a low voice. "I need all the medical records related to cell regeneration experiments from the last 20 years. Especially the cases involving the former researcher Connie Rodriguez." Connie's house was on the edge of town, an old adobe building with a backyard, full of medicinal herbs. The smell of rosemary and rue mixed in the air while she prepared a tea for Jenny, who was now resting on a simple wooden bed. Irene walked back and forth, her hands twisting the worn apron. "You need to explain what's going on," demanded Irene, her voice trembling. "First, that rich man appears out of nowhere. Then you talk about Alan, and now my daughter is like this." Connie sighed deeply, stirring the tea with a wooden spoon, her eyes full of secrets fixed on Jenny. "Sit down, Irene. This story started long before your daughter was born." On the other side of town, in the Vasconcelos' ranch house, Ted was restless. The pains had returned with full force, as if his body was protesting against the distance from the girl. That's when Donna entered his office, carrying an old yellowed folder. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door carefully. "You won't believe what I found out about that midwife." At Connie's house, Irene listened in astonishment as the old midwife revealed a story that seemed impossible. 20 years ago, I wasn't just a midwife. I was a researcher working in a laboratory specializing in cell regeneration. Alan, your husband, was one of the volunteers in our experiments." "What?" Irene almost dropped the cup of tea that Connie had offered her. "But he was just a rural worker." "Yes, and that's precisely why we chose him," Connie continued, her voice low and controlled. We needed healthy people without contact with conventional medical treatments. The serum we developed was different from anything that had ever been created. In the ranch house, Donna spread documents on Ted's desk. She's not a simple midwife, brother. Connie Rodriguez was a brilliant scientist until she was expelled from the scientific community for experiments considered unethical. And do you know who was one of her patients? That girl's father. Ted felt his heart race. What exactly are you suggesting, Donna? Back at Connie's house, Jenny was beginning to wake up, her eyes opening slowly. "Mom," she called, her voice weak. Irene ran to hug her daughter, but Connie stopped her. "Wait, she's still very sensitive. The gift takes a heavy toll when it's used." "What gift are you talking so much about?" asked Irene, frustrated. "The serum we developed," explained Connie, sitting on the edge of the bed, "aimed to create cells with extraordinary regenerative capacity. Most of the volunteers showed no results, but your Alan, he was different. His cells began to show unique properties." Back at the ranch house, Donna continued her revelations. The laundress's missing husband didn't just disappear, Ted. He ran away because his body was changing in a way that scared even the researchers. And now, his daughter is showing the same characteristics. Ted stood up abruptly, ignoring the pain that shot through his body. "Is that why I felt better after meeting the girl? She inherited this condition?" In Connie's simple room, Jenny sat on the bed, her eyes displaying that ancient wisdom that so intrigued everyone. "Mrs. Connie, I saw him again in my dream. The sad man. He's getting worse because I'm not there." Irene felt a shiver run down her spine. "Honey, what are these dreams?" "They're more than dreams," Connie explained. "Your daughter inherited a unique sensitivity from her father. She not only has regenerative cells, she can transfer that ability to others through contact, presence, even intention. But every time she does that, she gets weaker," Irene completed, finally understanding why her daughter always seemed so tired after her special moments, as they used to call them. At the ranch house, Donna approached her brother with a calculating look. "Think about it, Ted. If we could study this girl, understand how she does this, we could revolutionize medicine. Our company could expand into the pharmaceutical area. It would be an even bigger empire." Ted stared at his sister, horrified. "You're talking about using a child as a guinea pig?" "I'm talking about saving your life," Donna exploded. "Or would you rather die and leave me running everything alone?" At that moment, Dr. Olson entered the office unannounced, his face pale. "Ted, we need to talk. Your new tests. Something very strange is happening with your cells." The businessman sat down heavily in his armchair. The pain was now almost unbearable. "Olson, I need to tell you something. About a girl." But before he could continue, his cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. When he answered, Connie's grave voice sounded on the other end of the line. "Mr. Vasconcelos, Jenny is asking to see you. But you need to understand one thing first. If she continues to use this gift to help you, she may not survive." The silence that followed was deafening. Donna watched her brother with sharp eyes, while Olson tried to understand what was happening. On the other end of the line, one could hear Irene's restrained crying. "Please," Ted finally said. His voice choked. "Don't let her do that. I can't carry that guilt." "It's not your choice," Connie replied. "Nor mine, nor Irene's. Jenny has the same spirit as her father. When she decides to help someone, nothing stops her." Night fell over Sedona, enveloping the town in shadows. In Connie's backyard, Jenny looked at the stars, her little fingers playing with a sheep's cord. No one noticed when she whispered to the wind, "I'm going to heal you even if it hurts, because this pain you feel, I feel it too." Dawn in Sedona found Dr. Olson hunched over his microscope in the small laboratory of the municipal hospital. He had spent the entire night analyzing Ted's blood samples, trying to understand the inexplicable changes he observed. The cells exhibited a behavior that defied everything he had learned in his years of medicine. "Doctor," called Rita, the head nurse, entering the lab. "There's a woman who wants to talk to you. She said it's urgent." When he looked up, he came face to face with Connie. The old midwife still carried that aura of mystery that had always accompanied her, but there was something different in her expression. An urgency, a concern. "We need to talk about Ted Vasconcelos," she said, closing the door behind her. "And about a girl named Jenny." Meanwhile, in Irene's simple house, Jenny barely touched her breakfast. Sitting at the kitchen table, she played with the breadcrumbs, her pale face betraying sleepless nights. "Honey, you need to eat," Irene insisted, her heart aching to see the girl so downcast. "You can't go take care of the sheep like this." "Mom," said Jenny, her big eyes fixed on the untouched cup of milk, "why did Dad leave?" The question hit Irene like a punch. In 3 years, it was the first time her daughter had directly questioned her father's disappearance. Before she could answer, they heard knocking on the door. It was Donna Vasconcelos, impeccably dressed, completely out of place in the simple environment. "Mrs. Irene, can we talk?" At the Vasconcelos ranch house, Ted was having one of the worst mornings since the diagnosis. The pains had returned with frightening intensity, and not even the strongest medicines seemed to work. He dragged himself to the porch, seeking the fresh morning air, when he saw Dr. Olson arriving hurriedly, accompanied by Connie. In the hospital laboratory, minutes earlier, the old midwife had revealed to the doctor surprising details about her past research. "The serum we developed," she explained, "wasn't just for cell regeneration. We were looking for something deeper, the ability of a cell to transfer its healing properties to others." "Like a form of cell therapy?" asked Olson, fascinated. "More than that," replied Connie, her voice low. "Imagine cells that could not only regenerate, but teach other cells to do the same. That's what happened to Alan, Jenny's father, and now his daughter was born with that natural ability." In Irene's house, Donna sat uncomfortably in the simple kitchen chair, her expensive perfume mixing with the smell of brewed coffee. "Mrs. Irene, I came to make a proposal, one that could change the lives of you two." Irene watched the elegant woman with suspicion, while Jenny, sitting in the corner of the kitchen, kept her eyes fixed on Donna, as if she could see through her. "I'm willing to offer a considerable amount," Donna continued, opening her designer bag. "In exchange, we only ask that your daughter participate in some studies, totally safe, of course, at the best hospital in Phoenix. You want to study me because I can heal people?" Jenny's voice sounded surprisingly mature. "Like you wanted to study my father?" Donna paled, while Irene stood up abruptly. "What are you talking about, honey?" At the ranch house, Olson explained to Ted what he had discovered in the blood samples. "It's unbelievable, Ted. Your cells are behaving in a way I've never seen before. It's as if they've learned to heal themselves." "It was the girl," Ted murmured, the pains momentarily forgotten before the revelation. "But why did the pains come back so strongly?" "Because the process isn't complete," Connie interfered. "Jenny's gift is like a planted seed. It needs time and continuous contact to grow, but every time she does that, she gets weaker," Olson completed, understanding. "It's as if she transfers her own vital energy." In Irene's kitchen, the tension was palpable. "Mrs. Donna," said Jenny, getting up from her chair, "you don't want to help, you want to control." "Jenny!" Irene scolded, frightened by her daughter's audacity, but the girl continued, her eyes fixed on Donna's. "You're afraid of losing control of the money when your brother gets well. That's why you want to take me away from him." Donna stood up abruptly, dropping her expensive bag. Papers scattered on the floor, among them old laboratory photos showing Alan during the experiments. Irene grabbed one of the photos, her hands trembling. My God, what did they do to him? At that moment, they heard a car braking sharply. On the street, it was Ted who had insisted on coming personally, despite his weakened state. Olsen and Connie accompanied him. "Donna," he called from the door, his voice weak but determined. "Stop this now!" The scene that followed would forever remain in the memory of everyone present. Jenny, without hesitating, ran to Ted and held his hand. The businessman immediately felt that familiar sensation of warmth and renewal, but this time he saw with horror the girl instantly paling. "No!" several voices shouted at the same time. But something different happened. At the moment, when Irene, desperate, tried to separate her daughter from Ted, her hands touched those of both. And then a soft light seemed to envelop the three. Connie widened her eyes, understanding. Love. It's motherly love. That's what was missing in the experiments. The vital energy needs a pure emotional conductor. Olsen watched in amazement as Ted's vital signs normalized, while Jenny, instead of weakening, seemed stronger than ever. Donna, leaning against the kitchen wall, watched her plans crumble. "This isn't possible," she murmured, letting herself slide to the floor. But it was possible. In the simplicity of that humble kitchen, something extraordinary was happening. Connie's science, Jenny's natural gift, and Irene's unconditional love had united into a force that no laboratory could ever replicate. And somewhere, a man named Alan felt something change within him, as if a distant call was pulling him back home. The first rays of sunlight the next morning found Irene sitting on the porch of her simple house, her hands still trembling as she held the old photographs of Alan. In the images yellowed by time, she saw her husband connected to strange devices, his younger face marked by an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of fear and determination. In the next room, Jenny was sleeping soundly for the first time in days. The event of the previous day had left everyone stunned, especially Connie, who had spent the entire night making notes in an old notebook, trying to understand how motherly love had completely transformed the healing process. "Mrs. Irene." Ted's soft voice pulled her from her thoughts. The businessman was different, not only by his healthier appearance, but there was something in his eyes, a humility that did not exist before. "Can I sit with you for a while?" Irene made a silent gesture of agreement, still absorbing all the revelations of the last hours. Ted sat in the simple wooden chair, looking out of place in his expensive suit. "I didn't know," he began, his voice low so as not to wake Jenny. "When I first met your daughter, I had no idea of this whole story. Donna, she found out about the experiments before me. She had been investigating for weeks." At the municipal hospital, Dr. Olsen worked tirelessly, analyzing the new blood samples. Ted's cells now showed a completely different pattern. Not only were they regenerating, but they seemed to have developed their own memory of the process. "It's extraordinary," he murmured to himself when Connie entered the laboratory carrying her old notebook. "I need to show you something, Olsen," she said, opening the notebook to a specific page. "These are my notes from 20 years ago about Alan's case. Compare them with Ted's tests." The doctor's eyes scanned the yellowed pages, widening gradually. "But this is impossible. The cells are following exactly the same pattern, but more stable." "Because now we have the missing element," explained Connie, her eyes shining with a mixture of scientific excitement and concern. "True love as a catalyst. Not only Jenny's gift, but Irene's unconditional love worked as a stabilizer of the process." And at the Vasconcelos ranch house, Donna had been locked in her room since the previous day, refusing to answer phone calls or receive visitors. Sitting in her velvet armchair, she held an old photograph. she and Ted as children, smiling next. To their father. "What have I done?" she murmured to herself, silent tears streaming down her made-up face. Greed and the fear of losing control of the business had transformed her into someone she barely recognized. Back at Irene's house, Jenny woke up slowly, feeling different. It was as if a new force was running through her veins, something she had never experienced before. "Mom," she called, leaving the room. She stopped when she saw Ted sitting on the porch with Irene, the two talking in a low voice. "Honey!" Irene stood up immediately, running to hug her. "How are you feeling?" "Strong," Jenny replied, smiling. "And different. It's like now I understand better how it works." Ted watched the interaction between mother and daughter, feeling an emotion he couldn't explain. That's when he noticed something strange. A soft glow emanating from Jenny's hands, something he had never noticed before. "Connie needs to see this," he said, grabbing his phone. In the lab, Connie and Olsen were about to leave when they received the call. When they heard about the glow in Jenny's hands, they exchanged meaningful glances. "It's the same thing that happened to Alan," Connie whispered, her mind going back 2 decades in time. Before he disappeared. But there was something different this time. While Alan had been frightened by the manifestations of his gift, isolating himself more and more until finally running away, Jenny seemed at peace with her abilities. "It's because she's not alone," said Irene, as if reading Connie's thoughts. "Alan tried to carry this weight alone. Jenny has all of us." The morning advanced in Sedona, and little by little the news of the miracle at the laundress's house began to spread. Curious neighbors passed by the street, trying to peek through the simple fence of the backyard. That's when an unfamiliar car stopped in front of the house. A man got out, tall, with graying hair and eyes tired from so much traveling. He wore simple clothes and carried only a worn backpack on his back. Jenny was the first to feel his presence. Something inside her reacted, as if a dormant part of her gift suddenly awakened. "Honey!" called Irene, noticing the sudden change in the girl's behavior. "There's someone out there," said Jenny, her eyes fixed on the door. "Someone like me." Ted stood up, instinctively protective. Connie and Olsen, who had just arrived, stopped at the entrance to the backyard, feeling the tension in the air. The man opened the gate slowly, his eyes scanning each face present until they fixed on Irene. 20 years of absence weighed in his gaze. "Alan," Irene's voice came out as a strangled whisper. Jenny stepped forward, her little hands now glowing more intensely than ever. "Dad." The moment seemed suspended in time. Alan looked at his daughter as if he saw a mirror of himself, recognizing in her the same gift that had made him run away so long ago. "Forgive me," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. I thought I was protecting you by staying away." Connie stepped forward, her old notes trembling in her hands. "You didn't need to run, Alan. What happened in the experiments?" "It wasn't the experiments that scared me," he interrupted, still standing at the entrance. "It was the power. What I could do, I thought it was too dangerous." Jenny, in her unique child's wisdom, approached her father. "It's not dangerous when there's love, Dad. Mum taught me that yesterday." The girl's simple words hit Alan like a revelation. Tears began to flow down his face, marked by time and regret. And then something extraordinary happened. When Jenny touched her father's hand for the first time, the glow in her hands intensified, enveloping the two in a soft aura. It was as if two parts of the same gift had finally met, recognized each other, completed each other. Irene, unable to contain herself, ran to hug them both. And again, as the day before, love transformed power into something greater, something purer. Ted watched the scene with tears in his eyes, finally understanding that his healing had not been only physical. Donna, who had arrived silently and watched everything from the street, felt her hardened heart begin to melt. And there, in that Simple backyard in Sedona, a new story began to be written, no longer a story of escapes and fears, but of encounters and redemption. Irene's kitchen had never received so many people at the same time. The simple breakfast, homemade bread, cornbread, and strong coffee, was served on the worn wooden table while everyone tried to process recent events. Alan sat quietly, his hands calloused by years of work, occasionally touching Jenny's face, as if he still couldn't believe she was really there. "Where have you been all this time?" Irene finally asked, her tense voice balancing between relief and the accumulated pain of years of abandonment. Alan took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the attentive faces around him. "In the beginning, I went to Montana, working on isolated ranches, then Wyoming, always moving when things started to happen." "What things, Dad?" Jenny asked, her big eyes fixed on her father with a mixture of curiosity and understanding, beyond her age. "The gift," he replied, his voice low. "It always started the same way. I worked on some ranch, lived a normal life, until someone needed help, and I couldn't help it." Connie, who had spread her old notes on the kitchen counter, looked up. "You kept healing people even after you ran away?" "It wasn't a choice." Alan ran a hand through his graying hair. "It was like a call. I felt other people's pain. I literally felt it. And when I touched them, the glow appeared," Jenny completed, showing her own hands that still emanated a soft light. Dr. Olson, who until then had observed everything in silence, stepped forward. "But why run away? You could have helped so many people in a controlled way, with medical supervision." "It's not that simple," Ted interrupted, surprising everyone with his sudden understanding. "Power is scary, not only others, but ourselves. I'm living proof of what people are capable of doing when they discover something like this." Donna, who remained near the kitchen door, felt the weight of her brother's words. Her hands unconsciously squeezed her designer bag where she still kept the documents she had collected for her now abandoned plans. "But now it's different," Irene said, her voice gaining strength. "Now we know that love is the key, isn't it, Connie?" The old researcher nodded, picking up one of her most recent notes. "What happened yesterday proves my theory. The gift is not just about cell regeneration, it's about connection, about vital energy shared through true love." "That's why I always felt so tired afterwards," Jenny murmured, as if finally understanding, something that had always intrigued her. "I was giving my own energy. But yesterday was different," Connie continued, her eyes shining with the excitement of discovery. "When your mother joined the process, the energy wasn't just yours, Jenny. Motherly love created a cycle, a balanced exchange." Alan stood up abruptly, walking to the kitchen window. The simple backyard outside was lit by the morning sun, the clothes on the line swaying gently in the breeze. "I never had that," he said, his voice choked. "It was always just me, alone. With this gift, every time I helped someone I got weaker, more scared, until one day, the day you decided to leave," Irene completed, standing up too. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you trust me?" "Because I loved you too much to put you at risk," he replied, turning to face her. "The researchers, the people who found out, everyone wanted to use the gift in some way. Some for greed, others for science, but in the end it was always about using." Ted felt the weight of Donna's gaze on him. His sister finally approached the table, placing her bag on it carefully. "I have something to show you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Something I discovered during my investigations." From inside the bag, Donna pulled out a yellowed envelope. "These are records of other cases, other people with similar gifts, not only from Connie's lab, but from other places, other times." Connie took the envelope with trembling hands, spreading its contents on the table. Photographs, reports, newspaper clippings, all telling stories of extraordinary people who had disappeared over the years. "So we're not the only ones," Alan murmured, approaching to examine the documents. "No," confirmed Donna, "and they all follow the same pattern. People with the gift appear, help others, and then disappear. Always alone, always running." "But why?" asked Dr. Olson, fascinated by the discoveries. "Fear," Jenny answered simply, her childish voice carrying an ancient wisdom. "Fear of hurting those they love, fear of being used, fear of not being able to control." The silence that followed her words was broken by the sound of footsteps in the backyard. Everyone turned to the door, tense, only to see Mr. Johnson, the owner of the sheep that Jenny herded. "Excuse the intrusion," said the elderly, man, his straw hat in his hands. "But the sheep, they're restless. They seem to miss the little one." Jenny smiled, standing up. "Can I go, Mom? The sheep need me." Irene looked at Alan, a silent question in her eyes. He nodded slightly. "I'll go with you," said Alan, standing up too. "I want to see my daughter, doing what she knows how to do best. Take care." As father and daughter walked away towards the pasture, followed by the emotional gazes of everyone, Connie made a note in her notebook. "The gift is not a curse to be carried alone, but a blessing to be shared in family." And so it was that morning in Sedona, old wounds began to heal, not only through the extraordinary gift that ran in the veins of father and daughter, but through the most fundamental power of all, family love, that finally found its way back home. Mr. Johnson's pasture stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with wildflowers that danced in the morning breeze. Alan watched in wonder as Jenny led the sheep with surprising naturalness, her little bare feet stepping on the grass with familiarity. "Did you always know you were different?" he asked, sitting on a rock while his daughter worked. Jenny stopped. For a moment, her eyes fixed on a sheep that had strayed from the flock. "I knew I could feel things that others couldn't. Like now, I can feel that sheep there has a pain in its paw." Alan followed his daughter's gaze, noticing the sheep limping slightly. Without hesitation, Jenny approached the animal, her small hands beginning to emit that soft glow that he now knew so well. "Wait," he said, standing up quickly. "Let me help. You don't have to do this alone." Back at Irene's house, Connie and Dr. Olson were absorbed in the documents that Donna had brought. Each reported case seemed like a piece of a larger puzzle that was beginning to make sense. "Look at this," said Olson, showing a yellowed report. In 1985, a woman in rural Pennsylvania presented the same signs. She took care of a community. A garden and all the plants she touched flourished extraordinarily. People began to notice that their pains and illnesses improved when they were near her. "And what happened to her?" asked Irene, who couldn't stop looking out the window in the direction where Alan and Jenny had gone. "Disappeared," replied Donna, her voice filled with regret. "Like everyone else, like Alan. Whenever people started to notice, whenever science tried to intervene, they ran away," completed Ted, who was unusually quiet, observing everything with new eyes. His own body was now living proof of the power of that extraordinary gift. In the pasture, Alan knelt beside Jenny, placing his hands alongside hers on the sheep's injured paw. The glow intensified, and something inexplicable happened. Father and daughter felt their energies intertwining, strengthening each other instead of depleting. "It's different," Jenny whispered, marveling. "I'm not getting tired." "Because now there are two of us," replied Alan, silent tears running down his face marked by time, "as it should have been from the beginning." Back at the house, Connie was making frenetic notes in her notebook. That's it. All the cases that went wrong, all the ones that ended in escapes or tragedies, have one thing in common: isolation. The gift was never meant to be used alone. "What do you mean?" asked Irene, approaching the table. "Think about it," continued the old researcher, her eyes shining with the excitement of discovery. "When Jenny used the gift alone, she was exhausted. When you joined her, Through motherly love, the process stabilized. Now with Alan, they can strengthen each other, Olsen completed, understanding. It's like a current of energy that needs to be shared so as not to overload a single point. Donna stood up abruptly, walking to the window. That's why my plans were so wrong. I wanted to isolate the girl, study her as a unique phenomenon. But the real miracle is in the connection, not the individual. In the pasture, the sheep was already moving normally, grazing quietly with the flock. Alan and Jenny remained sitting on the grass, an indescribable peace enveloping them. "Why did you come back now, Dad?" asked Jenny, playing with a wildflower. Alan looked at the horizon, where the Red Rocks Mountains stood out against the blue sky. "I started having dreams with a little shepherdess who had the same gift as me. At first, I thought I was going crazy, but the dreams were getting stronger, clearer. I also dreamed about you," revealed Jenny. "I just didn't know it was you. I saw a sad man, alone, with his hands shining like mine. It was the dreams that brought me back," continued Alan, "but it was something else that made me stay. When I saw you with your mother yesterday, when I realized that the gift could be different, that it didn't have to be a curse." His words were interrupted by a scream coming from the direction of the house. It was Irene running towards them with a paper in her hand. "Alan! Jenny!" she called, breathless. "Connie discovered something in the old documents. Something about your family, Alan." Father and daughter stood up quickly, the flock of sheep stirring with the sudden movement. When they arrived at the house, they found everyone gathered around the kitchen table, where an old document was carefully opened. "It's a letter," Connie explained, her voice trembling with emotion. "A letter from your grandmother, Alan. She also had the gift." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the wind in the leaves of the backyard. Alan took the letter with trembling hands, immediately recognizing the delicate handwriting. "My dear son," he began to read aloud, "if you are reading this, it is because you have finally discovered the truth about our gift. It is not a curse, as many thought. It is a blessing that needs to be shared. The mistake of our family was to try to carry this power alone, out of fear or shame. But the gift only truly flourishes when nurtured by love." Alan stopped reading, his hands shaking too much to continue. Jenny gently took the letter from her father's hands, continuing to read with her childish voice. "True power is not in the hands that shine, but in the hearts that unite. Never forget, we are guardians of a gift that only exists to bring people closer, never to drive them away." Irene embraced her husband and daughter, her tears mingling with theirs. Connie made frenetic notes, while Olsen watched in wonder the glow that now enveloped the entire family. And it was there, in that simple kitchen in Sedona, that old truths began to reveal themselves, and new paths began to open. The gift that, for generations, had been carried as a solitary burden finally found its true purpose: to unite, to heal, and above all, to love. The discovery of Alan's grandmother's letter triggered a series of events that no one could predict. In the days that followed, Connie plunged into an obsessive research, correlating her old notes with the new documents found by Donna. The old midwife barely slept, her tired eyes scanning pages and more pages of historical records. "Look at this," she said one morning, spreading documents on the table in Irene's kitchen, which had become the group's informal headquarters. "I found records of similar cases throughout the Southwest, always following family patterns, always passing from generation to generation." Dr. Olsen, who now divided his time between the hospital and his research with Connie, adjusted his glasses to examine the papers. "They're like little constellations of healing scattered across the country, and always connected to the land," observed Irene, who had begun to notice a pattern. farmers, ranchers, people who work directly with nature. Jenny, who was playing in the yard with her sheep, ran into the kitchen, her eyes shining with excitement. "Dad, Dad, come see what happened to the apple tree." Everyone followed the girl to the back of the yard, where an old apple tree, which hadn't produced fruit for years, was now laden with blossoms. Alan approached the tree, touching its trunk with reverence. "It was when we touched it yesterday, remember?" said Jenny, jumping for joy. "When you were teaching me how to better control the glow." Ted, who was watching the scene from the porch, felt something strange in his own body, a kind of tingling in his hands. Since his healing, he had begun to develop a different sensitivity, as if his body had been permanently altered by contact with the gift. "Connie," he called, his voice tense, "I think something is happening to me." The old researcher approached. Quickly, her experienced eyes examining Ted's hands, which were now emitting a very soft, almost imperceptible glow. "Extraordinary," she murmured. "The gift didn't just heal you, Ted, it multiplied." Donna, who in recent days had been quieter and more observant, stepped forward. "What do you mean?" "He also developed the gift." "Not exactly," explained Connie, making frenetic notes in her notebook. "It's like his cells have learned to replicate the healing process, but in a more subtle way." Alan approached, his eyes fixed on Ted's hands. "That's how it started with me too. First there were just sensations, then the glow got stronger. But why now?" asked Olson, already preparing to collect new blood samples. "Why didn't it happen immediately after the healing?" It was Jenny who answered, her childish voice carrying that ancient wisdom that still surprised everyone. "Because now he's not afraid anymore. Fear gets in the way of the glow." Irene sat on the steps of the porch, absorbing all these revelations. She remembered how her own participation had enhanced Jenny's gift, and an idea began to form in her mind. "What if," she began, hesitant, "what if the gift wasn't something that some people have and others don't? What if it was something that everyone can develop, but some have it easier?" Connie stopped writing, her eyes widening at the possibility. Like a latent ability that just needs the right conditions to manifest. "Love," said Alan, hugging Jenny. "Love is the right condition." At that moment, something extraordinary happened. The glow in Ted's hands intensified slightly, and one of the ripe apples fell from the tree, rolling to a stop at his feet. "Take it," encouraged Jenny, smiling. "The tree is giving you a gift." Ted picked up the fruit with trembling hands, and as soon as his fingers touched the skin, the bruise that was on it disappeared, leaving it perfectly healthy. "It's different from our gift," observed Alan. "Softer, more natural." "As if it were a variation," agreed Connie, already scribbling new theories in her notebook. "Each person manifests it in a unique way, depending on their own nature." Dr. Olson, who had run to get his equipment in the car, returned with a portable microscope. "We need to document this. It's a revolutionary discovery." But before they could begin any analysis, they heard a noise coming from the street. It was Mr. Johnson, running breathlessly. "Mrs. Irene," he called, leaning on the yard fence, "the news has spread. There are a lot of people arriving in town. Journalists, scientists, curious people. They're all looking for the healing family." "Ulbratu." The initial panic was interrupted by Jenny's calm voice. "We don't need to run away this time, do we, Dad?" Alan looked at his family, at Ted, at Connie and Olson, who had helped them so much, and even at Donna, who was slowly finding redemption in her repentance. "No, honey," he replied firmly. "This time we will face it together. The gift is no longer a secret to be hidden. It's a light to be shared." Irene stood up, her posture determined. "But we're going to do it our way. No experiments, no exploitation, just love and healing." Connie closed her notebook, a serene smile on her wrinkled face. I think I finally understood the true purpose of all my research. It wasn't to create a miracle serum in the lab. It was to document how love can transform science into something deeper. And so, as the sun began to set in Sedona, that small, diverse group came together in a collective embrace. The glow that emanated from them did not come only from the hands of Alan, Jenny, and Ted. It came from everyone's hearts, proving that the greatest gift was not the ability to heal, but the courage to love and accept the extraordinary that exists in each one. The news about the healing family spread through Sedona like wildfire. The next morning, the quiet dirt road where Irene lived was unrecognizable. Cars from different states parked nearby, journalists with cameras and microphones, curious people clustered at the yard fence, all wanting a glimpse of the extraordinary. Inside the house, Irene prepared breakfast as she always did, her hands trembling slightly as she cut the homemade bread. The normality of the routine now seemed like a safe haven amidst the storm that was forming outside. I'm not going to let anyone turn our family into a circus, she said, her voice carrying a determination that surprised everyone. I already lost Alan once because of this gift. I'm not going to lose anyone again. Ted, who had arrived early after a sleepless night, watched the movement through the kitchen window. His hands still emitted that soft glow, but now he was beginning to understand better how to control it. I have an idea, he said, turning to the group. My father's ranch. It's big enough to give us privacy and space to better understand what's happening. Connie looked up from her notes. And we can transform the old barn into a study space, do things our way without external interference. But what about the sheep? Asked Jenny, worried about her little protégés. We can take them too, replied Alan, smiling at his daughter. Mr. Johnson has already commented that he's thinking about retiring. We can buy the flock. Donna, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. I can help with that. It's the least I can do after everything. Dr. Olson, who had just arrived from the hospital, brought worrying news. The hospital board is pressuring me to reveal the details of Ted's exams, and there's a team of researchers from Los Angeles wanting to establish a protocol of studies. No, said Irene firmly, we're not going to turn this into a scientific experiment. We've already seen where that can go wrong. At that moment, they heard insistent knocking on the front door. It was Mrs. Mendelssohn, Irene's former employer, her normally serene face marked with worry. Irene, she called, entering hurriedly. You need to see this. She held out a local newspaper where a sensational headline announced, Miracle in Sedona, family with healing powers attracts national attention. But it wasn't the headline that worried Mrs. Mendelssohn. It was the photo that accompanied the article. An image of Jenny with the sheep, her hands emitting that characteristic glow. Someone had managed to photograph her without them noticing. This has to stop, said Alan, his voice trembling with contained anger. Our daughter is not a circus attraction. It was then that Jenny, who had been unusually quiet, approached the kitchen window. Outside, among the curious and journalists, there was an elderly woman in a wheelchair, crying silently. She's in a lot of pain, said the girl, her eyes fixed on the woman. Not only in her body, in her soul, too. She lost her husband recently. Irene knew that look from her daughter. It was the same one she had when she knew she needed to help someone. Honey, we can't. There are a lot of people out there. But, Mom, replied Jenny, turning to face them, what if that's the true purpose of the gift? Not to hide, not to be studied, but to help those who really need it. Connie closed her notebook, a new understanding illuminating her face. Of course. We were so worried about understanding the how that we forgot the why. Ted approached Jenny, his hands now glowing in tune with hers. She's right. We can't hide, but we can establish our own rules. What if, began Dr. Olson, an idea forming, we transformed the ranch not into a research center, but into a place of healing, a space where people who really need it can come, without cameras, without invasive studies, a sanctuary, completed Alan, understanding, like the ancient sacred places where people went in search of healing and peace. Donna, who was watching the woman in the wheelchair, felt tears in her eyes. I can help with the legal part, create a foundation, establish clear rules of privacy. And the sheep can help too, said Jenny, smiling. They always helped me, feel better when I was sad. Irene looked at her family, not only Alan and Jenny, but everyone present who, in some way, had become part of that extraordinary story. Then let's do it, but our way, with love, with respect, with dignity. Mrs. Mendelssohn, who had remained silent, squeezed Irene's hand. I'll help spread the right word in town. The people here know you, trust you. We can create a protection network. And so, on that chaotic morning, a new path began to emerge. It was not the path of escape, as Alan had chosen in the past. It was not the path of scientific exploration, as Connie had tried years before. It was not the path of greed, as Donna had initially planned. It was a path of balance, of wisdom, of love. A path where the extraordinary and the everyday could coexist in harmony, where the gift was not a burden to be carried alone, but a light to be shared with those who truly needed it. Let's start with her, said Jenny, pointing to the woman, in the wheelchair, because sometimes the greatest miracle is not healing the body, it's healing the heart. The move to the Vasconcelos ranch happened gradually over the following week. The old colonial house, which before seemed cold and imposing, came to life with the arrival of Irene, Alan, and Jenny. The sheep were installed in a specially prepared pasture, where the intense green contrasted with the wildflowers that sprouted everywhere. Mrs. Antonia, the woman in the wheelchair, had become the first person to experience the new purpose of the gift. After that chaotic morning, she was invited into Irene's house, away from curious eyes and insistent cameras. My husband Vincent passed away 3 months ago, she said, her wrinkled hands trembling as she held a cup of tea. Since then, I can't walk anymore. The doctors say it's psychosomatic, but the pain is real. Jenny sat next to her, her big eyes full of understanding. You're not sick in your body. You're sick with longing. It was an extraordinary moment. When Jenny took Mrs. Antonia's hands, the glow that emerged was different, softer, warmer. Alan, recognizing something familiar, approached and joined his hands to theirs. It's like music, said Jenny, closing her eyes. I can hear your sadness, like a sad melody. Ted, who was watching everything with his new developing gift, noticed something surprising. He could see a kind of golden light enveloping the three, but it was different from the usual healing glow. We're not healing her body, explained Jenny later, when Mrs. Antonia had fallen asleep serenely on the couch. We're helping her to keep Mr. Vincent's love in a way that doesn't hurt so much. Connie made feverish notes in her notebook. The gift adapts to the person's real need. It's not just physical healing, it's emotional, spiritual healing. Now, a week later, Mrs. Antonia had not only returned to walking, but had become an important ally. As a respected retired teacher in the city, her word carried weight. She began to organize a system to identify people who really needed help, filtering out those who came only out of curiosity or scientific interest. In the old barn on the ranch, transformed into a welcoming space with the help of Mrs. Mendelssohn and other women from the city, Connie and Dr. Olson established a small practice. Not to do experiments, but to monitor and document the healing processes in a respectful and discreet way. It's amazing, said Olson one afternoon, examining the results of some tests. Each person responds uniquely to the gift. It's as if the body and soul find their own path to healing. Donna, who had surprised everyone with her dedication to the project, managed to establish a legal foundation that protected the family's rights and privacy. The Sheep Sanctuary, as it was officially registered, was technically an alternative therapy center protected by strict confidentiality terms. But it was on a particularly significant afternoon that something extraordinary happened. A young mother, Maria, brought her 5-year-old daughter, Rita, who hadn't spoken since witnessing a traumatic accident. "The doctors say there's nothing physically wrong," explained Maria, her deep eye circles revealing sleepless nights, but she simply stopped talking. Jenny, who was playing with her sheep, approached Rita naturally. Without words, she took the girl's hand and led her to the flock. The two sat on the grass, and something magical began to happen. The glow that emanated from Jenny's hands was almost imperceptible, but the sheep, sensitive as always, formed a circle around the girls. Rita, for the first time in months, smiled. "They don't talk either," said Jenny softly, "but they know how to tell stories with their hearts." Alan and Irene watched from a distance, their own intertwined hands emitting that soft glow that now seemed so natural. Ted, who had learned to use his gift in a unique way, noticed a change in the air, like a dense cloud of sadness dissipating around Rita. That's when it happened. Rita, still smiling, pointed to one of the sheep and whispered, "Fluffy." Maria fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't just tears of joy. Something was happening to her too. The gift somehow was healing mother and daughter simultaneously. "That's how it should be," said Connie, watching the scene with watery eyes. "The gift isn't about power or science. It's about reconnection, about restoring broken bonds." That night, after everyone had retired, Jenny sat on the porch of the ranch house with her father. The stars shone brightly in the Sedona sky, and the soft sound of the sheep's bells created a comforting melody. "Dad," she said, her voice carrying that ancient wisdom that still surprised everyone, "I think I understood why Grandma wrote that letter. She knew that one day we would need to understand that the gift isn't ours." "What do you mean, honey?" "The gift belongs to love," she replied simply. "We just help it find its way." Alan hugged his daughter, feeling that familiar warm energy flowing between them. In the pasture, the sheep settled down to sleep, and in the house, Irene was preparing tea for Mrs. Antonia, who had decided to spend the night helping with a new family that would arrive the next morning. Ted, watching the scene from his old porch, now so full of life and purpose, felt a deep gratitude. His cancer had not only disappeared, he had found something much more valuable, a new way of seeing the world, of understanding the power of love and connection. And so, under the starry sky of Sedona, the sheep sanctuary continued its silent work of healing, not only bodies, but souls. A work that, like the gift itself, spread naturally, like the wildflowers that now covered the ranch fields, without haste, without fanfare, but with a force capable of transforming lives one story at a time. With the arrival of winter in Sedona, the sheep sanctuary gained an even more welcoming atmosphere. The mornings began with a thin mist covering the pastures, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the smell of the firewood that heated the ranch house. Irene had transformed the old colonial kitchen into a true reception center, where people from all parts of the country found not only the hope of healing, but also the warmth of a home. On one of those cold mornings, while Jenny was feeding the sheep with fresh hay, a new visitor arrived at the sanctuary. Unlike the others, she did not come in search of healing for herself, but brought a revelation that would deeply shake everyone's understanding of the gift. Bethany, a 78-year-old woman, had traveled 3 days from rural Pennsylvania after reading about the sanctuary in a local newspaper. Her wrinkled face carried an expression of someone who keeps old secrets, and her hands, calloused by farm work, trembled slightly as she held a worn wooden box. "I knew your grandmother," she said directly to Alan, who received her on the porch. "Mary was more than my friend. She was my gift partner." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the sheep's bells in the distance. Connie, who was documenting the cases of the day, dropped her notebook. "What do you mean, gift partner?" asked Alan, his voice trembling. Bethany opened the box carefully, revealing a set of yellowed letters and an old diary. "In the 1950s, there was a group of us. It wasn't an organized group like you have here. It was more a network of special people scattered across the country. We communicated through letters. We met at religious festivals, always discreetly. Ted, who had developed an acute sensitivity to the manifestations of the gift, noticed a soft glow emanating from Bethany's hands as she handled the old documents. "You also have the gift," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. "Had," she corrected, smiling sadly. "With age it was weakening, but what I came to tell you isn't about me. It's about something your grandmother discovered, Alan. Something she didn't have time to reveal before she left." Jenny, who had approached silently with some sheep following her, sat at Bethany's feet. "It's about the moon cycle, isn't it?" Everyone looked at the girl in surprise. Bethany smiled, a gleam of recognition in her eyes. "Exactly, little one." "How do you know?" "The sheep told me," Jenny replied simply. "They always get different when the moon is full. The glow, too." Connie picked up her notebook from the floor, her hands trembling with excitement. "Of course! How didn't we realize before? All the reports of more powerful healing happened during the full moon." Bethany began to read excerpts from Mary's diary. "The gift isn't constant as we thought. It pulsates with nature, waxes and wanes with the moon. But it's not just that. It also gets stronger when shared, like a river that gets stronger when joining with others." Irene, who was preparing tea in the kitchen, felt a shiver run down her spine. She remembered how Jenny's gift became stronger when she and Alan joined together to heal. "That's why the sanctuary works so well," she murmured. "It's not just a place of healing, it's a meeting point of gifts." Dr. Olson, who had arrived for his daily visit, listened to everything with scientific fascination. "This would explain why some days the results are more intense than others. It's not just the emotional state of the people. It's a confluence of natural factors." Donna, who in recent months had dedicated herself to legally documenting each case of healing at the sanctuary, noticed something in her records. The most surprising cases all happened during the full moon. But it was when Bethany revealed the content of a specific letter that everyone understood the true dimension of what was happening. Mary discovered that the gift isn't just hereditary, she read, her voice trembling with emotion. It can be awakened in anyone who has a deep connection with nature and with true love. Some are born with it stronger, like a seed already sprouted. Others have it dormant, waiting for the right moment to bloom. "Like what happened to Ted," observed Connie, making frenetic notes. "And it's not just that," continued Bethany. "The gift has memory. Each person who is healed carries a little of it with them, like a small flame that can be passed on." At that moment, as if to confirm her words, something extraordinary happened. Rita, the girl who had recovered her speech weeks before, was playing in the pasture with other children who were visiting the sanctuary. Suddenly, when one of the children fell and scraped his knee, everyone saw Rita's hands emitted a soft glow as she comforted her friend. "It's happening again," said Jenny, her eyes shining with understanding. "The gift is spreading, like the wildflowers in the field." Alan picked up one of his grandmother's letters, recognizing the delicate handwriting. The real miracle is not the healing itself, but how it multiplies through love. Each person touched by the gift becomes a potential guardian of that light. The rest of that day was dedicated to studying the documents brought by Bethany. Connie and Dr. Olson immersed themselves in the old records, discovering patterns and connections that explained much of what they had been observing at the sanctuary. At night, while everyone gathered in the great room of the ranch house, Jenny sat among her sheep in the pasture, watching the moon that was beginning to grow in the sky. "What are you thinking, honey?" asked Irene, joining her. "That grandma was right," replied the girl, stroking one of the sheep. "The gift is like the stars. It seems that they are separated in the sky, but in fact, they are all part of the same light." And so, under the starry sky of Sedona, the sheep sanctuary gained a new dimension. It was not just a place of healing, but a point of awakening, where dormant gifts began to bloom, proving that the true miracle was not only in the hands that shone, but in the hearts that opened to a new form of love and connection. The discovery about the expansive nature of the gift brought profound changes to the sheep sanctuary. With the approach of the full moon, a different energy hung in the air. Connie and Dr. Olson had completely reorganized their way of working, now attentive not only to the healing processes, but also to the signs of awakening of the gift in other people. On a particularly significant morning, while the mist still covered the pastures, something extraordinary began to happen. Mrs. Antonia, who was now a constant presence at the sanctuary, was guiding a group of visitors when her hands began to emit a subtle, almost imperceptible glow. "It's happening more often," she explained to Connie, who was documenting each new case of manifestation of the gift. "Especially when I'm really connected with someone's story." Ted, whose own gift had developed in a unique way, began to notice an interesting pattern. "It's not just during the full moon," he observed, showing his personal records to Dr. Olson. "The gift seems stronger when there is a synchronicity of feelings, when people are truly open to each other." Jenny, who continued to be the beating heart of the sanctuary, began to teach other children to connect with the sheep. "They are our teachers," she explained with her simple wisdom. "They know when someone is sad even before the person realizes it." It was during one of these sessions with the children that something remarkable happened. Rita, the girl who had recovered her speech and developed her own gift, was playing with a group of children when one of them, Luke 7, began to show signs of awakening. "Look, Aunt Irene," called Rita, excited. "Luke's hands are glowing just like ours." Luke had arrived at the sanctuary 3 weeks before with his grandmother, Mrs. Gertrude, who suffered from deep depression after losing her small farm to debt. The boy, always quiet and observant, spent hours with the sheep, just watching and occasionally helping Jenny with feeding the animals. "It's not a coincidence," said Bethany, who had decided to stay at the sanctuary to help better understand the legacy of Mary. "The gift has always been stronger in people with connection to the land, with animals. It's like nature is a catalyst." Alan, who watched everything with a mixture of admiration and responsibility, gathered everyone in the great room of the ranch house that night. The moon, almost full, illuminated the room through the old windows. "We need to better understand our responsibility," he began, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "The gift is spreading in a way that not even my grandmother predicted. We can't let it become something uncontrolled." Irene, who in recent months had become a kind of guardian of the traditions of the sanctuary, stepped forward. "Maybe that's the true purpose of the sheep sanctuary. Not just to be a place of healing, but a school. A place where people can learn to awaken and control their gift safely and lovingly." Connie opened her notebook, now full of observations about the new cases of awakening. "In the last 2 months, we have documented 17 cases of manifestation of the gift in people who came seeking healing. In all cases, there is a pattern: deep connection with nature, ability to empathize extraordinarily, and mainly, a genuine desire to help others. Dr. Olson added, and the most interesting thing is that each manifestation is unique. Ted, for example, developed an ability to perceive emotional imbalances. Mrs. Antonia has a special gift for comforting people in mourning. Rita can connect, especially with other children. It was then that Donna, who had been quieter in recent times, brought an important question. But how are we going to protect these people? It's already difficult to keep the sanctuary protected from explorers and curious people, with more people manifesting the gift. Her concern was interrupted by a soft sound coming from the pasture, the bells of the sheep ringing in an almost musical harmony. Everyone went to the porch, where they found an extraordinary scene. Jenny, Luke, and Rita were sitting in a circle in the pasture, surrounded by the sheep. The glow that emanated from their small hands seemed to dance with the moonlight, creating a spectacle of soft lights that intertwined in the air. "That's how it works," said Jenny, her voice carrying that ancient wisdom that still surprised everyone. "The gift doesn't need protection. It protects itself, choosing hearts that know how to keep its secret." Bethany, watching the scene, began to recite from memory an excerpt from Mary's diary. "The gift is like an underground river, which surfaces only where the earth is ready to receive it. We cannot control it, only guide it with wisdom and love." That night, while the almost full moon bathed the sheep sanctuary with its silvery light, a new understanding began to form. The gift was not just a power of healing, but a call to awaken what was deepest and truest in each person. Irene, preparing tea for everyone in the kitchen, watched through the window the three children still in the pasture, now teaching other children to connect with the sheep. "It's like we're seeing the beginning of something much bigger," she said to Alan, who hugged her from behind. "Bigger and simpler at the same time," he replied, his hands glowing softly as he touched his wife. "The gift has always been there, in all of us. We just needed to learn to trust love enough to let it awaken." And so, under the starry sky of Sedona, the sheep sanctuary continued its transformation, not only as a place of healing, but as a point of awakening for a new way of seeing and feeling the world. A place where the extraordinary and the everyday mixed naturally, like the glow of the stars reflected in the eyes of the sheep that grazed under the moonlight. The arrival of the full moon transformed the sheep sanctuary into a spectacle of soft lights and renewing energies. The old colonial house, once a symbol of Theodore Ted Vasconcelos's power and solitude, now throbbed with a life of its own. In recent weeks, the number of people manifesting the gift had grown surprisingly, each bringing their own unique way of expressing that extraordinary energy. One especially significant morning, while the dew still covered the grass in the pasture, Jenny gathered all the children who had awakened the gift for a special lesson. Sitting among the sheep with Luke and Rita by her side, she began to share her wisdom in a simple and profound way. "Everyone shines in a different way," she explained, showing how her own hands emitted that familiar light. "It's like the stars in the sky. All are different, but all a part of the same light." Connie, who watched the scene from afar while taking notes, noticed something extraordinary. The glow emanating from the children seemed to create patterns in the air, like a dance of lights communicating with each other. "It's incredible," murmured Dr. Olson, who had arrived early to document the events of that special day. "Each manifestation of the gift has its own energy signature." It was then that Bethany, who was sitting on the porch knitting, dropped her work. Her hands, wrinkled with age, began to emit a glow that hadn't been seen for decades. "It's coming back," she said, tears streaming down her age-marked face. "The gift is coming back." Alan and Irene rushed to help her, but Bethany didn't need help. The glow in her hands was different, not the power of healing that everyone knew, but something deeper, older. "It's the memory of the gift," she explained, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mary wrote about it in her diary. Sometimes the gift isn't for healing bodies, but for keeping and transmitting ancient wisdom." At that moment, something extraordinary began to happen. The sheep, always sensitive to manifestations of the gift, formed a perfect circle around the group. The glow from Bethany's hands intensified, and images began to form in the air, like living memories of all who had shared that gift through the ages. "Look," exclaimed Jenny, her wide eyes fixed on the ethereal images. "It's all the people who came before us." The children watched in amazement as the stories unfolded before them. Ancient healers, wise midwives, solitary shepherds, all connected by that same mysterious light that now ran in their veins. Ted, who was watching everything from the porch, felt his own gift react in a new way. It was no longer just the ability to perceive emotional imbalances. Now he could see the connections between people, like threads of light that united them through time and space. "It's a web," he said, his voice filled with awe, "a web of light that connects us all." Donna, who in recent months had dedicated herself to legally protecting the sanctuary, finally understood why her old plans to control and study the gift were so wrong. "We can't own something like this," she murmured, watching the images in the air. "We can only be a part of it." It was then that Mrs. Antonia, arriving for her daily visit, brought surprising news. "You need to see this," she said, holding out several local newspapers. The headlines spoke of inexplicable phenomena happening in different parts of the country. People developing healing gifts, children with extraordinary abilities, entire communities experiencing mysterious transformations. "It's happening everywhere," said Connie, her scientific mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what they were witnessing. "The gift isn't just spreading, it's awakening." Irene, who had become a kind of guardian of the sanctuary's traditions, remembered something that her mother-in-law had written in the letter. "The gift is like a seed that waits for the right moment to sprout. Sometimes it takes generations to find fertile soil. And the soil is love," Jenny completed, her childlike voice carrying that ancient wisdom that still surprised everyone. "True love, which doesn't want to own, just share." The images in the air began to intensify, now showing not only the past, but glimpses of what appeared to be the future. People in different places discovering their own gifts, communities transforming through the power of love and healing. "That's why the sanctuary needed to exist," said Alan, finally understanding. "Not just as a place of healing, but as a point of awakening, a reminder that we all carry this light within us." The sheep, still in a circle, began to emit a soft, almost musical sound. It was as if they were also part of that great web of light and connection. "The sheep always knew," said Jenny, caressing one of them. "They are our teachers because they never forgot what it's like to be part of something bigger." Bethany, still emanating that ancient light, began to recite words that seemed to come directly from the heart of the earth. "The gift is not a distant miracle, but a reminder of what we have always been. We are all guardians of the light, even if some have forgotten how to shine." And so, on that special day under the full moon, the sheep sanctuary experienced its greatest transformation. It was no longer just a place of healing and learning, but a portal to something much larger, a collective awakening that was beginning to spread like waves of light across the world. The children, sitting in a circle with their hands glowing, were living proof that the future would be different. Not a future of controlled powers and studied in laboratories, but a future where the extraordinary and the everyday would dance together, like the lights that now danced in the air over the sheep pasture. Dawn arrived at the sheep sanctuary with a different light. It was as if the very sky of Sedona, Arizona, was brighter, more alive. In the pasture, the sheep moved in a peculiar way, forming patterns that seemed to dance with the morning breeze. Jenny was the first to notice that something extraordinary was about to happen. "Mom," she called, still in her pajamas on the porch of the old house. "The sheep are singing." Indeed, a soft, melodious sound came from the herd, unlike anything they had ever heard before. It wasn't just the bells, it was as if the sheep themselves were producing an ancient music, a song that seemed to come from the earth itself. Gradually, all the residents and visitors of the sanctuary were awakened, attracted by that mysterious melody. Connie, who had spent the night studying the latest records of manifestations of the gift across the country, dropped her notes when she saw the spectacle that was forming in the pasture. The hands of all the children who had developed the gift began to glow simultaneously, without them making any effort. Luke, Rita, and the other children gathered naturally around Jenny, as if guided by an invisible force. "It's happening," said Bethany, her own hands glowing with that ancient light that carried the memories of the gift, the great awakening that Mary predicted. Alan and Irene approached their daughter, their hearts racing with a mixture of awe and worry. The glow emanating from Jenny's hands was different. It wasn't just light, but seemed to contain all the colors of dawn. "Honey?" Irene called softly. "It's okay, Mom," Jenny replied, smiling. "The sheep are showing us the way." At that moment, something extraordinary began to happen. The glow from the children's hands began to expand, forming a circle of light that stretched across the pasture. The sheep, still singing their mysterious melody, moved in perfect harmony with that energy. Ted, who was watching everything with his gift now fully developed, perceived something beyond the visible light. They're like roots of light," he said, marveling. "They are connecting with the earth, with everything around." Dr. Olson, trying to document the phenomenon, noted that his measuring instruments were reacting inexplicably. "It's as if the very energy of the place is transforming," he murmured. It was then that Mrs. Antonia arrived running, holding her cell phone. "It's happening everywhere," she exclaimed. "I just talked to my sister in rural Pennsylvania. The plants in her yard started to glow, and there are reports coming in from all over the U.S. Connie grabbed her notebook, her hands trembling with emotion. "It's exactly as Mary described. In her last letter," she said, flipping through the pages until she found the specific passage. "There will come a time when the gift will no longer be a secret to be kept, but a light that will spread like dawn, awakening what has always been dormant in every heart." The children, still in a circle, began to sing along with the sheep. They weren't known words. It was a sound that seemed to come from the earth itself, from the very light that now emanated from them. Donna, who in recent months had transformed profoundly, felt tears run down her face. All this time, we tried to control something that was actually teaching us to free ourselves. It was when Jenny stepped forward, in the center of the circle. Her small, outstretched hands seemed to contain all the brilliance of the rising sun. "It's not just about healing," she said, her voice merging with the music of the sheep. "It's about remembering." "Remembering what, honey?" asked Alan, approaching. "Remembering who we really are," she replied, her eyes shining with a wisdom that transcended her age. "We all have the gift. Some have just forgotten how to awaken it." At that moment, something even more extraordinary happened. The circle of light began to pulse, and each person present, not just the children, not just those who had already manifested the gift, began to feel a soft warmth in their hands. "It's like an invitation," said Bethany, her hands now shining with full force. "The gift is calling us all." Irene and Alan joined their daughter in the center of the circle, their hands joining naturally. The glow emanating from them was so intense that it seemed to illuminate the entire valley. "Now I understand," said Ted, his voice choked with emotion. It wasn't about being cured of cancer. It was about awakening to something bigger. News continued to arrive from all parts, people developing healing gifts, children starting to shine, plants responding to human touch in miraculous ways. The gift was spreading, not like an epidemic to be controlled, but like a dawn impossible to be contained. "That's how it should be," said Connie, closing her research notebook for the last time. "We no longer need to document the extraordinary. We need to live it." The sheep, still singing their ancestral music, began to lie down in a circle around the children. The glow now pulsed in tune with their hearts, with the earth itself. "What happens now?" asked Rita, her voice small but firm. "Now," replied Jenny, smiling, "we really begin. It's no longer about a special gift that some people have. It's about awakening the love that has always existed in all of us." And so, on that extraordinary morning in Sedona, Arizona, the sheep sanctuary completed its transformation. It was no longer just a place of healing. It was no longer just a center of awakening. It was a living reminder that the true miracle is not in the power to heal, but in the power to love. The sheep continued their song, the children continued to shine, and the gift continued to spread throughout the world. Not as something to be studied or controlled, but as an invitation for all to remember their true nature, beings of light, capable of transforming the world through the simplest and most powerful of gifts, true love. And Jenny, the little shepherdess, who had started it all, smiled at the rising sun, knowing that this was not an end, but a beginning of a world where the extraordinary and the everyday dance together, where the light of love shines in every heart, and where the sheep continue to sing their ancient songs of healing and awakening. "Come on, Mum," she called, reaching out to Irene. "We have a lot of work ahead of us. The whole world is beginning to remember how to shine." And so, under the bright sky of Sedona, Arizona, a new story began to be written. No longer just the story of a family with a special gift, but the story of a world rediscovering its own inner light, one heart at a time.